So it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Conversations Around the Table Engaging Influencers panel, moderated by Mr. Andy Vance. Feedstuffs' Andy Vance communicates today's issues in the agriculture and food retail industries through powerful storytelling. A compelling speaker and expert commentator, Andy helps audiences understand how to understand the often distinct perspectives of farmers and consumers. Andy and I and Mike Wright from Diamond V were just talking in the foyer about how we need one more Buckeye to do an OHIO. So can I, Leah Dorman, I know you're in here. Jack Fisher? Okay, can we do an OH? Okay, thank you guys. Another fun fact, Andy gave me my very first adult internship when I was in college at the Ag Radio Network. So if anyone doesn't like me working in ag communications, you can blame Andy. So join us on the stage and help me welcome this panel.
So see us after the session so we can get that photo op with the OHIO folks on stage. That'd be great. And if you're not a fan of Ohio State, gosh, I'm sorry for your luck, because we're pretty good at that football thing, right? Okay. All right. Be kind. Let's give a warm round of applause to our panelists for this session as they come up on stage, please. Ladies. I'm going to introduce the four of them, and then we're going to get right into the important topics of discussion, because I think the opportunity to engage with influencers in the social media space is more important than ever, and how to do it well and to get insights from people who have done it well is maybe the really, really important question. It's not enough to engage, but to make the engagements meaningful and useful, and to help advance the conversation and the dialogue. To help us talk through all of that, our panelists include Hana Bieliauskas, digital practice lead with Inspire PR Group. Wave, Hana, as I tell them a little bit about you. Hana leads Inspire's digital practice in Columbus, Ohio, from Asheville, North Carolina. Beautiful town, both of them actually. Hana oversees digital strategy, including social media, online marketing and advertising, and influencer engagement. She regularly works with many prominent national food bloggers on behalf of clients, and has planned more than 30 award-winning digital campaigns and blogger influencer campaigns and events. Joining her is Lauren Lane, owner and blogger of Lauren Lane Culinarian. After 25 years in creative design and management with Hallmark Cards, Lauren retired to pursue her lifelong passion for food and entertaining. Lauren spends her time as a food blogger, photographer, educator, pop-up dinner host, and social media influencer. Adriane Heins of Heins Family Farms is a former magazine editor, writer, author, and communications director turned farm wife and mom, who believes that big things happen when we set down our phones, pick up our forks, and have a chat. I like that.
I do too.
Yeah, you can tell I picked up the fork a couple of times, I guess. She and her husband Chris, a Missouri dairy farmer, are mom and dad to 3 kids who keep them nearly as busy as the dairy cows do. And then finally, Dr. Ruth Woiwode is the manager of Livestock Audit Services at Food Safety Net Services. Dr. Woiwode is manager of that program and is a PAACO certified professional in dairy, feedlot, swine, poultry, and meat plant animal welfare auditing. Her work includes responding to allegations of animal neglect and abuse and ensuring compliance with on-farm animal care guidelines. All right, so the first question, and we'll start on the far left and work our way down the panel, but share your perspective on this question of influencer engagement. So why is it important for animal agriculture? Let me give us started, Adriane.
Sure. No pressure. Start with the farmer. For us, I think as farmers, we have a wide variety of jobs. I should be clear, I'm the dairy farmer's wife. So my husband has 50 jobs throughout the day. He's caring for cows, he's caring for land, he's caring for machinery, he's caring for employees. I'm keeping him caffeinated. That's my job. So we all have different jobs, different skill sets, different things that we excel at. And as dairy farmers, we would love to be able to have one-on-one interactions with consumers each day. I'd love to be able to go to the grocery store and tell every person buying a gallon of milk, thank you. I can't do that, though. So for our family, we can tell our story as best we can as we have time and as we are able. But when we make a connection, when we form a relationship with someone like Lauren as an influencer who's got people that she's engaging with en masse, it's a lot easier for us to say, this is your skill set. You work hard at being able to tell our story in a new and better way that we haven't thought of. You work hard at taking pictures of our cows that make them look even more adorable than they are. And so it would be natural for us, when we are good at our jobs at taking care of our cows and our land, then also say, we'd like to link arms and be in lockstep with you as you do your job of helping to tell our story. So as a farmer, we can't do all of the things, so it's very natural for us to want to say, let's come alongside someone who can help us in that regard, and to do it in a new and really lovely, exciting sort of way.
Hana, how does that square with your experience in working with influencers? Does that fit your experience?
Yeah, I think that's right on, honestly. We have worked with many food bloggers and influencers for animal agriculture organizations throughout the country and nationally. And the power of influencers, I'm sure you've seen it these days, is huge. And I think that's becoming even more so as Instagram continues to grow and as it kind of grows and evolves. Instagram really gives influencers the ability to do things instantly. So they can share Instagram stories instantly. Those aren't tailored or edited in any way. So they're able to share a really genuine and authentic view of farm life. And these influencers and bloggers have huge and super engaged networks. So what they're sharing on their blogs, what they're sharing on their social media sites is being seen by thousands of people. And whether it's influencing them to buy a product or just influencing them in how they make their food decisions, they have a huge impact. So I think that we have seen a massive growth in confidence in the food systems through engaging with really strong and well-engaged bloggers and influencers.
Speaking of a blogger and influencer, Lauren, give us your perspective from that side of the keyboard, so to speak.
I guess I feel like quitting my corporate job and doing what I love, I get to write and talk about what I love, and being a child of a farmer and being brought up on, Esther's milk, I talk about her all the time, but, in our cattle, I feel like there's so many misconceptions out there now, and so that's when I started just picking and choosing topics that I'd like to talk about and that I can talk about in my own quirky little funny way, or, and also I think another misconception sometimes is like you don't get beat up about that, but I get beat up on my social media sometimes when I post a picture of a cow or whatever, and it's how do you beautifully explain your point of view without turning people off, or I don't know. I feel like the more I can connect with my audience and be really authentic and work with people that I'm passionate about, that's where my influence is golden, I think.
Okay, so Ruth, you've got the technician's perspective then obviously as well when you're dealing with these audits, but give us your perspective on that question and why it's important for agriculture, animal agriculture in particular, to be in that space of influencer world.
Well, I think each of us has a role as an influencer, both in our own immediate circles. And with the advent of social media, it's difficult to measure how far that extends. From my perspective, personally, I've had an interest and a passion for advocating for the place of animals in agriculture from an early age. Growing up on a family homestead operation with multiple species, and also spending a lot of time in a flat barn, with literally watching milking with a belt and can system that is almost not seen today. My role today enables me to advocate for, beyond just the place of animals in agriculture, the future of the animal agriculture industry through the implementation of animal care programs that function as industry standards. And that in my role, I am able to verify then the implementation of a certain level of animal care. That is truly what I believe is what will drive the sustainability of the animal care animal industry.
Okay, good opening perspective. So let's talk through the nuts and bolts, if you will, of influencer engagement. And thanks, Tyne. This concept of paid versus earned influencer engagement and how it works in different scenarios. And maybe we'll start, Hana, with you as a PR pro. We talk the media space about earned media versus paid media. We now talk about that in the social influencer space as well. earned engagement versus paid engagement. So how do we use those in different scenarios? What does that look like? For people who are like, what are you talking about? I have no clue. People actually get paid to post stuff on the internet?
They do. They get paid a lot. So
could you quantify a lot? Because I mean,
it depends on the influencer. But I think the earned media space is when you are pitching media, getting it in the news, getting stories out there. The blogger and influencer engagement is kind of a different beast in some ways. We work with a lot of clients for paid partnerships with bloggers and influencers, and it is worth every penny, is what I will say first. But for many of these influencers, this is their job. It's their livelihood. Some of them also have a full-time job. Some of them are moms. Some of them, it depends on the influencer. But for many of them, this work that they do is their job. It involves a lot, as I'm sure you know. It involves really crafting really interesting and engaging posts on their blog. It involves a lot of social media outreach. When we partner with these influencers, we will require a certain number of posts or that they fulfill. So they have to make sure that they are doing that. If they're developing a recipe using a certain type of product, they have to purchase that product, try the recipe, make sure it's good. So there's a lot that goes into partnering. Now there are some instances where we might do an unpaid partnership. For instance, I've planned a lot of farm tour, blogger tour events for clients, and we'll invite bloggers, for instance, from across the country. We do one for the American Dairy Association Mideast. About 10 bloggers come in from across the country to Cleveland. They tour dairy farms. They get to visit restaurants, see the whole journey from farm to fridge. When we bring them in, the hotel is paid for, the travel is paid for, so we won't pay them on top of that. That is an experience. But if we are doing a recipe development post, for instance, then we do pay them. So it really sort of just depends on the partnership, but I think the key is that we always want that authenticity. So even when you're paying somebody and they might say in their blog post, sponsored by Ohio Beef Council, we still want them to say, to really put it in their own perspective and really talk about it in a genuine and authentic way.
Lauren, let's again put on the other side of the keyboard. How often are you pitched? Let's just stay away from paid for a minute, but for earned influencer opportunities, how often are you approached or pitched by a PR person or a group, company, organization, say, hey, wouldn't you love to write about or Instagram about this?
It definitely varies, but I guess I would probably say 3 times a week. Someone would reach out, but the trick is, I remember the first time I got a national brand wanting me to work with them. I was so excited. It was like, they found me, in the middle of Kansas. But then when I found the product and wrote the post, I was like, this is so not me, and so then you have to completely put your heels in the ground and never do that again. So there's very few. I probably only worked with 3 clients on a regular basis. And I think that's another thing to think about when you costs of influencers and bloggers. I work with one company that I'm very passionate about, Cervasi. It's an Italian food company in Kansas City, and we work on a yearly basis. So when you talk about unpaid, they may pay me for a certain amount of blog posts, Instagram posts, and recipe development. But then throughout my life, anytime I'm using their product, you're going to see it on Instagram, and that lives on forever in the universe. And so it's evergreen content. So it kind of goes both ways. But back to your point about the time, it is a full-time job. I know people don't realize it, but to create a recipe for me is about 8 hours, and it's trying it, retrying it, and just to make sure everything's perfect. And posting a blog post, the hashtag research is so critical to get organic. I may have a lot of followers, but I need to constantly, if this is my business, reach out and get new followers and find like-minded people that want my content. So it's a full-time, I call it magazine. It's like, I feel like my brand and my online presence is kind of like my magazine. So it's like putting that out there.
Adriane, your experience as an influencer is different being on the farm side of things, but do you find that you're approached by potential partners and say, hey, we'd love to have you come and do one of the events that maybe Hana described? What's your stance on that as an influencer, on how you want to be approached by potential partners?
We have a really wonderful organization, Midwest Dairy, that advocates on behalf of dairy farmers in our area. And they do a fantastic job of linking us up with a whole host of different resources. So getting to meet someone like Lauren and learn what she does, bringing tours to the farm, things of that nature. And we try and take advantage of that as much as we can, because it would be lovely if, like I said before, if I could thank every single person or meet every single person who buys dairy or has a question about dairy. I can't do that. But Lauren can put one post up and reach 15,000 people in a day. That's me having to talk to 15,000 people in one day, and there's just no way that you can do that. So it seems like a no-brainer to me to be able to work with people like this that are in sync with our values and who we are as farmers, so that we can broaden that reach, and so that we can also do our job of taking care of our cows and our land, without having to sacrifice other things. So it's a great gift, and we feel very fortunate to be able to work with people, to bring people to us, to go to people. It's always an adventure.
Hannah, I want to come back to you for a minute. You talked about the difference between paid versus earned, and maybe putting together as blogger tours and kind of influencer experiences. But when is it appropriate to say, hey, we need to pull out the checkbook when you're talking to a client, saying, hey, we need to think about compensating an influencer, and how do those conversations typically go? How do you make those decisions and then put them into practice?
So I think that, influencer engagement is part of your digital strategy. So it's a part of a social media strategy. It's just a tactic. And so if it's not an event, or if you're not going to be providing them with a lot of product that they're very passionate about, then it's really time to figure out what is the budget for your blogger program. We work with a lot of state and national associations on recipe development, because ultimately at the end of the day, the increase in demand is the goal. So if we are working with the National Turkey Federation with food bloggers, they're using different turkey products to develop recipes, and therefore they're also sharing information about turkey nutrition, turkey handling, safety on their blogs. And that goes out to all of their followers. And then they're also using a turkey product that people might not know how to cook or think about how they're cooking it. And so that's also reaching people. So you're getting a wide range of services on there, and a third-party validation to this information that they're sharing. So in my mind, unless there is a lot that the blogger influencer is being given in return, then they need to be compensated adequately. And by compensating them adequately, you're showing that you have trust in them, and that they have trust in you, and that you're going to be working together. Now, one key part of this is that we do develop partnership agreements that lay out everything that we will require in return, that they have to review, sign, and sometimes we go back and forth if they have some questions. But how many social media posts? When are they going to post? What are they going to include? Are they, they're going to integrate key points and messages that we provide. So everything is very clear, laid out, so that the organization knows, hey, this person is going to fulfill their obligation. And then the blogger and influencer just knows what's expected, and nothing comes at them that they don't know about.
Next question, I'm going to kind of open this up. Maybe Ruth, maybe you can start us, and then everybody can share their own thoughts. But what are some of the best practices you see in terms of connecting with influencers in a way that, and I heard this word earlier, that builds authenticity, right? So the relationship is authentic, and then kind of allows us to have trust toward an ongoing relationship. So what are some of the best practices for establishing those kind of trust-filled, authentic bonds?
Absolutely. As Lauren said, and I resonate with the idea of authenticity. I have the opportunity probably more and more frequently as I travel the country, actually responding to allegations in many cases of animal abuse or neglect, to engage people in my travel, in the grocery store, in various places. And also, I have a responsibility to engage those, in many cases, that I'm auditing and or communicating audit results to. All of those conversations pivot on my ability to connect with each person as an individual. I find that, you ever heard that auditors have a bad rap? What, they don't have personalities? No. All of those things, they're stereotypes. What I find is actually connecting with those that I'm auditing drives my ability to get critical details as I'm, in many cases, investigating. And establishing a certain level of trust is key to facilitating that process. How does that happen? What does that look like? If I'm doing a routine third-party verification of the farm animal care program on a dairy, the common ground might not actually be dairying. It might be something very different. What have you been reading recently? What are your kids' interests? Oh, they play sports. That type of thing is actually what drives connection much more quickly than they might think the actual topic of conversation. And that's just the starting point. And then turning it from, say, the oddity to someone that I'm just conversing with. I'll give an example. I was traveling specifically for follow-up related to allegations. And a woman and I just struck up a conversation, and I asked what she did, and she had retired from building Boeing aircraft. And so she had a fascinating life to tell of. And of course, then she asked what I did. Well, I'm an auditor. And that's oftentimes, I'll give the disclosure, right? I'm an auditor. And then that will usually lead to two questions. Well, a bank auditor or a financial or IRS auditor? No, and usually I'll just reply simply with an animal welfare auditor. And in most cases, many haven't even heard of that, and they're not even aware of what that is. And that's the opportunity to talk about existing and established animal care programs that are in place. And I like to refer to the farm animal care program because it's a great example, especially in the context of a lot of recent scrutiny in terms of animal care allegations, videos that have gone viral on social media. It's an established program that has a structure to respond to such allegations, a process. In many cases, sites may go on probation or may even be suspended, but there's a process to investigate, do focused audits, and also for them to respond as part of a process to them being reinstated. And the response to my telling that story is incredible. People that were not aware of that process are fascinated, and this goes to transparency. What would actually be a negative thing, right? Farms are being scrutinized for animal care practices, seemingly a breakdown in the system. The idea of complete transparency, telling about the process that's in place to respond, because we're dealing with humans and animals where mistakes will happen. What people care about is the process by which we respond, that there is a process, and that drives trust in transparency, in my experience.
Okay. So along those same lines, then, Lauren, when somebody is approaching you about trying to establish a transparent, authentic relationship, what do you see as some of the best practices when someone's approaching you? How do you want that relationship to start? How do you want those conversations to happen?
Well, as an influencer, I sometimes reach out to brands that I'd love to work with, and so that's a different ball of wax. But when people approach me, now that I'm very tuned into what I want to work with, if it's a good fit for me, I'm very transparent. Most of us that have been doing this for a living have a media kit. So you would get a copy of my media kit, you'd get my background, you get what I stand for, you get my pricing. And I think sometimes people get confused about the pricing structure because it is so different. And if there's a client I want to work with, it can look 100 different ways. But as a starting point, you can see the pricing for an Instagram post or an Instagram bundle that may be a post, a story, a video, or recipe, so you can do those types of bundles or a blog post. The other thing, like I was saying, we do contracts. We can do a year-long contract or a 3-month partnership to drive whatever goals you have. So there's a ton of different ways. So what I like to do is just send the media kit for full transparency and then work with you to find out exactly what you'd like. What's your budget? What would you like? And it may not look like anything that's in my media kit. It may look like something special and different, and that's okay too.
And so now you mentioned sometimes you're approaching brands. What do you find works? What's the trick that?
I haven't found that
what's
working.
the one weird trick that opens the door? To borrow a social media term.
It's so random to me. Like I said, I can get 3. I mean, I got 2 this morning. People reaching out to me. But if I reach out to somebody, it's like, ooh, this influencer wants something. So I have not broken that code yet. I'm still learning that. So if anybody knows, let me know what you want. But I don't know. I haven't figured it out. I just know that how I've been responding to clients I'd like to work with now is working, and it's full transparency. And like you were saying, really understanding the objectives, because I've worked with clients that don't even really know what their expectations are. So I need to sometimes outline, I'm going to post at the peak time. I know exactly when all my people are online. I know exactly which hashtags they're going to be searching for organically in their feed. I know exactly which stories they're going to watch and which ones they're going to exit. So I can help them form what they need to get their message out, which is helpful.
Adriane, I think we've been talking about social media and agriculture for 100 years now, it feels like. And in the early days that some of us joined Facebook and Twitter, and you'd start going to meetings like this and talking to farmers
Remember
about...
when you had to be in college to be on Facebook?
So in
Like
full transparency, I'm old enough that a professor had to invite me to be on Facebook because I was already done with school at that time. And
I was pretty close.
I was halfway to 100 or something, it feels like. So when we started talking about this, the whole issue was, I don't want to, as a farmer, Hana, you deal with that, and the clients you mentioned, you deal with that. I just want to farm. You've obviously opened the gates, so to speak, and bring people to the dairy. Talk to us about the best practices from that standpoint of why you're willing to do that, and what are your sort of rules of the road of, hey, if you want to get me involved at the farm level, here's how we do that.
I would echo the transparency thought. It's been our experience that when we can bring people to us and actually bring them on the property and bring them to the farm, we can see really big things happen. And that does take a bit of a leap of faith to actually invite people into that. My dad is a hog farmer in Iowa, so whoever raises bacon here, it put me through college, thank you. And he's like the curmudgeonly, like, kids get off my lawn kind of a guy who's like, why? I mean, like, he grew up with everyone working on a farm, so it blows his mind that people would be interested in coming to a farm, because in his mind, everybody he knows, everybody he grew up with, everybody lived and worked on a farm. And so this whole idea that people don't know where their milk comes from, or they don't know where their bacon came from, that's mind-boggling to him. So I think if we can kind of get past that and be willing to say it's one thing to read about where our dairy products come from. It's another thing to then say, come see how it's done. Come meet the people who do it. Come see the people who work for us, whose lives have been completely changed by being a part of this operation. We have people who were working dead-end jobs who couldn't figure out what they wanted to do with their life. They come to the dairy, they find that they love working with animals. They love working with their hands and working with machinery. So for us, it's been a process of saying, we're going to be vulnerable. We're going to say, come on, come see us, our warts and all. Come talk to these people whose lives have been changed. Come see what they do for us and what we're able to do for them. Come see our animals. Come feed our baby calves. And that's made a really profound influence on us, and I think on others. I remember a couple of years ago, right about this time of year, strangely enough, it was also raining nonstop, and my husband was wanting to chop rye silage. He's been checking his weather app 700 times a day. I know no one here does that. But it had finally stopped raining. He could finally chop silage. He'd been in the silage chopper for all of 4 hours. And a tour bus of dietetic interns pulled up for a tour. And in his head, he's thinking, I don't have time for this. We've been waiting to get in the field. He took the time. He said it was one of the best tours he'd ever given. Gotten more questions than he'd ever gotten. Questions he'd never even gotten before. And he said it changed my perception, it changed their perception. And he said, I found out later after they left that they had been a group of very skeptical interns who were not sure they were really going to believe any of what they saw. And in that 1 hour, 40 people's minds had been completely changed. So there's a big step in allowing that to happen, but also really big things can happen as a result of that. And that's been really fun for us to be able to see that.
That's the perfect segue, and we didn't even plan that to the next question, which was to share with us maybe your biggest success story, something where you said, wow, we hit this one out of the park. So you gave us a great one right there. That's a nice story. Hana, you've had a couple of, sounds like different types of experiences. When you look back and say, here's one, we really hit it out of the park.
Yeah, I have a couple of slides up there of some examples, and so I can talk through them if you wanted to pull those up. But we have led a couple of different blogger tours. These will just cycle through, but one of them was for the Ohio Poultry Association, and we had a blogger who came from Cleveland. Her name is Melanie Make. She's in Colorado now. Amazing blogger. But she came and we toured Bob Evans' restaurants and the egg farmer who gave all the eggs to Bob Evans. So for all the restaurants, he was there. And it's a few slides from here. But she posted on Instagram, she posted a selfie of herself with him. And she said, and she also found out that he produces the eggs that she buys in the grocery store in Cleveland. He has a huge farm in Ohio. And so she was able to be like, hey, I'm taking a selfie with my farmer. But she thought that was so interesting because she met him. And then we also toured a farm on that same tour. And it wasn't his farm, but it was a farm very much like his. They actually have 2 farms in Ohio, thousands and thousands of birds. She had heard a lot of rumors about how chickens are caged and how horrible it is. But she was able to visit this farm, actually hold a bird, and actually in the next slide on here, there was another blogger on that tour. They actually got to see processing. They got to hold a bird. By the end of this tour, they were very much like, wow, I understand this. The farmers really do care. The birds are housed in cages for a reason. And then they also understood the difference between cage-free and cages and why, both might make sense and why there's a choice. So I think that really brought them all the way around and to understanding where their food came from. And they also learned how to read on egg cartons, how you can tell where your eggs are from. And this blogger, Jelly Toast, she's from Toledo, Ohio, and she was so excited that she could go to Aldi and see that her eggs were from this farm. Even though it was a huge farm, it wasn't like down the street, but that really they came home with a really deep understanding of that. And then the Ohio Poultry Association continued to work with these 2 bloggers, and we still do for recipe development, and then also if there's events or things they can share.
Lauren?
Successes. I'll 2. I guess the one that with my client that I partnership for a couple of years now, I feel like that's successful just because it becomes part of your DNA. It's not so much about the post. It's not so much about the photograph or the recipe. It's about kind of your whole love for that brand, and so it's just so fluid. But the most recent one was the very first time we met, and it was, we talk about farm to table all the time. It's like in every restaurant, it's everywhere you see, but people don't get what it means. They don't really think about it. And so being brought up on a farm, I got it, but even going back to the farm and seeing it again, it just brought back all these memories and all the good things that happen in farms and food and tables and gatherings. So that really helped me kind of write and bring the passion back to the farmer and where the food actually comes from. And then the other, I had a thought. It always goes away right at the good time. But I don't know.
It'll come back to you.
It'll come back. But
so let's flip the script for a minute. We talked about a couple of successes. Now, and we can see who's the brave one that wants to jump out on this one first. Opposite of success. We had an experience that was not great, or an influencer partnership that turned out to be a big flop. What did that look like, and why didn't it work? I'll open it up. Who wants to tackle that one first?
I could tackle it. I mean, we've definitely gone on, we've had bloggers come on tours. We've had bloggers cancel at the last minute after their rooms have been booked and everything's been set up. The client wasn't super happy, but you just kind of have to say that sometimes that happens. There's nothing we can actually do about it. We've had bloggers who have definitely not fulfilled their expectations in partnership agreements before, or have done a really not so great job. You can tell when something is fake or when the person really doesn't believe in it. And we've had, bloggers write posts that just don't seem authentic. They just really seem like they copy and pasted the messages, just got it up so they could get paid, and that was it. And on the tours, we've had bloggers who have not been engaged, have not posted on social media. We don't require them to write a recap post, but usually if they want to have a partnership, a longer-term partnership, then they should. They just don't. I mean, they're usually, and I mean this in the nicest way, there's usually a dud in the group of bloggers who attend an event, and we just kind of move on. I mean, that's, you'll have that. And then we've also, had bloggers who we have, partnered with a dairy association for, and they publish a post one day that's like, yeah, milk, and then the next day it's like, here's an almond milk recipe, and here's why it's great, and we're like, that doesn't look genuine at all. So I think authenticity can be a real issue, and then from the side of just, writing a good post, sharing genuine social media messages, but then just also like living your brand and just really being a good ambassador for these different brands and organizations.
You said something there talking about the duds or the ones that don't live up to your expectations. It's not necessarily a bad thing to figure that out, though, in a scenario like that, right? Where, okay, we've brought a dozen bloggers on a tour, and we found out that here are 5 or 6 that really align with our brand, and here are 2 that we don't ever need to talk to again. Like, is that a useful part of that? I'm sure that's not a comfortable conversation with the client every time.
Right.
But is there a benefit to that happening?
I think it's really helpful to meet the bloggers that and influencers that you're working with versus just like casting a net and being like, cool, you live in Iowa, looks like you'll be a good one. I have established a lot of really good relationships with bloggers and influencers through attending conferences with them, through going to events, through really just speaking at their events, like getting to know them personally, and then I leverage those relationships for clients. But I know, for example, the American Dairy Association Mideast, Jenny Hubble is their communications director. She doesn't want to partner with bloggers unless she has met them at these events and really determines if they're a good fit for the organization. Ohio Poultry is similar. I know we've worked with Laura Durbin at Minnesota Turkey, and she met some of her bloggers and really likes having that relationship with them. So I do think it's really important for either you to know the bloggers, or if you have a PR firm, we're able to connect organizations with bloggers who we've worked with for many, many years and really know that they'll do a good job.
That's probably a good way to pose this next question of how do we determine the best fit? So if we're an organization in the audience and we're trying to find a social influencer type relationship, how do we find that right fit for our brand, our product, our audience, our customer, and then for the influencers on the panel, how do you go about determining if this particular partner sponsor is a good fit for my brand and my audience?
I think there's a lot of factors. I think their reach, you definitely are going in it to reach people, but the number of followers isn't necessarily the only determining factor. They have to have a high engagement because that's so important, and that's a whole other story. But also their aesthetic. If their aesthetic just doesn't feel like your brand, my aesthetic is very me, and if you have a fail that I had, I worked with a brand that was art directing my photography, and it's like you spend so many hours shooting these photos, editing these photos, and then to have someone say, make it bright and happy and kid-like, and it's like, well, that probably wasn't a good fit to start. Also, your budget is also super important to find out if it's a fit. Influencers are kind of broken up into ranges. There's micro-influencers, which I'm a micro-influencer if you have under 50,000 followers. That's a really good bang for your buck because we cost a lot less, but we still have high engagement. But then if you have a larger budget, you may want to work with a full-on, big-time influencer, and that message gets out even more broad, but it'll cost you. So there's a bunch of different factors, I think, definitely, style, reach, budget, all of those things. And communication. You have to have someone that communicate with you and fulfill your contract and what you've set out to do.
Other thoughts on this question of fit and audience and finding the right relationship?
I will just say, so my husband and I have been married for 5 years, and we met on eHarmony. I was living in St. Louis. He was living out here. And so before we met up the first time, he gave me his name, like you do, and I did a little cyber stalking. I was going to say tasteful Googling. I cyber stalked him. And like the first 3 pages on Google were all blog posts written by women, which I thought, this seems a little bit shady. I'm not sure I want to meet this guy. And they're all like, we've been to Chris Heins' farm. Oh, here's Chris Heins holding a baby calf. Oh, here's Chris Heins with his puppy. Here's Chris Heins in a tractor. And I'm thinking, I don't know how I feel about this. Turns out we had a tour of registered dietitians come to the farm. All lovely ladies. All had gone home and written posts. So it was one of those things where it worked out really great because they were obviously very interested in where their food came from. I mean, that could have been like a crash and burn story we could have shared. But it was amazing for me to see that it was one tour group, 1 hour, 40 gals came out and walked around the dairy, and how big of an impact that had. I mean, we might have never gotten married, but they wrote really lovely, great posts that were really helpful. So I think even in that, it may not just be one specific influencer, it may be just a host of people, and in the conversations they had on their way home, and as they talked through things, this outcrop of posts came from that. So I still give him grief. It lives on the internet.
See, I'm picturing this kind of like, the dentist commercials or the toothpaste commercial. 4 out of 5 dentists think you should. So 4 out of 5 dietitians thought you should date this guy.
I did. So thank you, dietitians. It worked out great.
It worked out okay.
It did, yes.
Well, that's great.
I would just say to look at what they've shared really closely on social media and actually read their blog posts. Yeah. Especially if you're engaging with a blogger, and I mean, I'm sure you've gotten some blind PR pitches that are horrible. I love asking bloggers like what the worst one is. I think it's awesome. I feel better about myself. But if you actually read their blog, you can say, hey, like I see that you really like ice cream. I love ice cream. Or like you can talk about your kids, like you said. Like you can say, hey, I see that your kids, are in these sports. So are mine. You can just kind of establish those like human connections with them. And then that they know that you're actually reading their stuff. Right. Or, if they've been in and traveled somewhere recently, you can be like, I love this place. And that just really shows that you're not just, blind carbon copying a bunch of people on there and sending out the same pitch. And I think that's really, really important. But then that's the only way you're going to know, too, if they're a good fit for your organization.
Oh, so you shouldn't just send an email to 50 or 60 influencers at a time?
No, please don't. Yeah.
Huh. Make a note of that. That could be important later, right?
Yes, exactly. Do that. Say the right name.
Mail merge the list at least, right?
Yes.
That's good. Yes. That's good. So, Ruth, something you said earlier when you were talking about the challenges that we have sometimes, we're dealing with people and animals, and sometimes that interface leads to mistakes or things that don't always go the right way. So let's offer some advice for the audience on how we communicate in a transparent, authentic way in this social influencer universe when things don't go right, when it's muddy as all get out on the farm and things are ugly and brown and yucky, or you've been on a farm and they've had a situation where you had to go in and maybe be a little rap on the knuckles. How do we communicate that in an effective, positive way moving forward?
In my experiences, I've been communicating that in the context of programs that are implemented for animal care and the structure that's in place. As I've engaged with people that are open to having these conversations outside of the Audit's general consumers, I describe the idea of having standards for animal care. We heard on our opening panel this morning some of those very basic concerns, right? They had to do with spacing. They had to do with cleanliness, right? And some of the very basic conditions, the living conditions of animals. So I'm able to speak to those things from the perspective of programs that actually are implemented. And then as a person that has a role in verifying the implementation of that in real time, I can speak to what happens when a standard isn't met, the type of follow-up that's required, an action plan that's then implemented, and what types of actions and responses are required by dairymen, managers, to then begin to respond and to return to good standing. Those types of conversations drive confidence, because at the end of the day, we're all humans, and if we can connect on that human basis with the realization that things sometimes don't occur, in the best way, right? It might rain. We might have very muddy cows, in part of the year. That's a reality. What matters is the response, and that there is a program in place that is being verified by an independent party. That's one of the opinions that I've also heard on other panels, is that is one of the places that a consumer will look to for their confidence. We heard this morning, a lot of it was point of sale material, some of the retailer communication, their messaging, but also the idea that at least someone has been on farm to verify that the practices published in a program are actually occurring.
Yeah, makes sense. Adriane, at the farm level, what's your thought on that? How do we show that side of farm life and keep it real, as the kids say?
I think it's important to address the situation. Sometimes when things go wrong, or like you said, the farm's not as beautiful as you want it to be, it's easy to sort of circle the wagons and we'll just pretend like this didn't happen or didn't exist, instead of being proactive and saying, okay, this thing happened. Now here are the steps that we're taking to deal with it. And you don't have to get into the minutia of every detail, but you can say, this thing happened, we're doing A and B to address it, and then use that as an opportunity to then pivot and say, and let us remind you, here's what we're about as farmers, here's what we're for. We're for our animals, we're for our land, we're for our employees, we're for our families. Even in those sort of crisis or not ideal situations, I think they can be turned into, if we're willing to just shift our view a bit, we can turn those into situations to remind people what we're about as farmers. And in the long run, I think that's going to have a better effect than just trying to pretend it didn't happen or to sugarcoat something. So it provides us yet another opportunity to speak up, to explain what we do and why, and then to continue that conversation rather than just battening down the hatches and being silent and pretending like something didn't happen. So I think for us, we just like to cycle back to saying, this thing happened today, whatever it was. We're taking care of it, and here's what we're about the other 364 days of the year when the lane isn't muddy or the calf didn't have to be pulled. Here's how this looks. It gives us an opportunity to do that.
And do you find people, the audience, and Lauren, this may be a question for you as well, the audience, how do they respond to those things? Like, do you get follow-up questions? Do you get comments? Do you get trolls and haters? What's the response when you go down that path? Yes.
Yes, exactly. You get it all. You definitely get it all. I haven't had too many bad experiences working with Midwest dairy. I haven't had any bad experiences working with, so I haven't had to deal with that yet. But I have had haters, obviously. They come out in groves anytime you post anything. But again, I have to respectfully disagree with them because I know what I saw. I know what I know what I saw. I know what I believe. I know what I've brought up with. And you can see like the grocery store shelves, half of them don't even have milk on them anymore. It's like this other stuff. And I feel like so many people are misguided to think all this other stuff is so much better than the milk that they're boycotting. I just think there's so much miscommunication out there, and that's all, we're here to do is just help set it straight.
Great. Well, let's take the not quite 15 minutes we have left to open the floor up for questions, because as you can tell, we've got four really fantastic panelists here, and I know you're probably just sitting there all a Twitter, to borrow a phrase, to ask them questions. Remember, there is a difference between a question, a statement, and a filibuster. Please prepare accordingly. We will accept the first, we will tolerate the second, we will beat with reckless abandon the third. We have microphones, so raise your hand, and Hana will send a talk stick your direction. I see we have one over here in the middle. The microphones are making their way your direction, I promise.
Hi, thank you so much for covering this topic. I am an online influencer going as the farm babe, so this is a topic I think that's so important, so thank you. My questions is actually kind of twofold. One of them being, as an influencer, what do you think is the best time or way to go about, like if you do decide you want to pitch a brand? And then the other part is, from the brand's perspective, what advice do you have to them as far as working with influencers, what to look for, or how to kind of go about that?
Well, the most recent success I've had of pitching a brand was reaching out to my grocery store, my local grocery store. As I teach cooking classes and host pop-up dinners, every single day I get questions, where do you shop, what do you do? So being able to put some analytics together for them. I posted a poll on my Instagram stories, and people could answer the poll, like if they'd be interested in this content, and then I can take that all up, wrap it up, and take it to the grocery store chain I wanted to work with. So that's one way that I've been able to do it. What was the second part?
The second part was for brands, right? So how brands approaching
I think the other thing is, if you're a brand approaching an influencer, hopefully you like their style, whether it's photography, their voice, their whatever. If you want to work with me, I'm not a super analytical person. I'm really kind of, I don't know how to describe myself. I kind of ramble, clearly. I ramble and I'm kind of funny. Yeah, right? I'm a little bit funny, and I even call myself tips and typos on my blog sometimes, because I'm more into getting info out than at being perfect. So if you're not okay with that, probably another influencer might be better to work with. If you're going to edit every single thing they say, if you're going to edit all their photography, probably just find someone that works a little bit better with you, I guess is my advice.
Hannah, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that because I get pitched by bloggers too, just to work with different clients, and I really appreciate it, on the contrast, when the blogger takes the time to look at what clients I'm working with, or if they met me at an event, takes the time to connect with me. But I do really like a good solid media kit, like you were talking about, that has how many followers the blogger has, how many page views, and then just really has some creative ideas. I've also really appreciated when bloggers and influencers have come with a really creative idea that I can give to the client, whether it's this new kind of video that they're producing, or doing a live segment, or something like that, where they can give me ideas and we can go back and forth and really find something creative to do. Versus just saying, hey, I'm blog at this blog, I think it would be really fun to develop a dairy holiday recipe. Let's get in touch. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, really. So that's a great point, though. So that client I was just working with, I forgot, I did put a storyboard together, and it was exactly what I would do for them if I had them for that month. And it was everything from taking their ad and how I would create recipes based on that ad, or meal planning or whatever, and just give them ideas that maybe they hadn't thought of, because they don't have time to create content or want to create content. That's what they're looking for to you, but it's kind of risky to know what kind of content you're going to get unless you provide them some insight to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Good question. So we have another one here in the middle.
Hi, my name's Leah. I'm from North Carolina. This is a question for Hana. I've worked with some different North Carolina ag and different PR firms. If you were, for some people here who are on farms but have never participated in farm tours, can you talk a little bit about how you might prepare them, or do you do site visits to kind of educate them on what to expect, or what to hide in the corner, that type of thing?
Yes. So I have relied very heavily on the state associations to really provide information on what they want to see in the farm. For example, American Dairy Association Mideast. On our tours, we visit a small dairy farm with only 50 cows, and then we see one with 3,000 cows. I am not the expert on how the dairy farm should look per se, and so I really rely on those experts at the Dairy Association to work directly with the farmers who they have relationships with to prepare them. But I think it's always helpful. We always develop some questions that might be asked, and that's where I can kind of, from the consumer side, see what they're going to want to ask the farmers who are there. So we can prepare them ahead of time with, hey, they might really ask you a lot about antibiotics. They might ask you why these calves are separated from their mothers. They might do this, these are the questions they might ask you. And so just be prepared for those, and don't think that it's off the table. Tell them genuinely what happens. So we always just want to make sure that everyone is prepared. We will always give the names of the influencers to the farmers in advance so they can really look at everything that the influencer is posting on social media, on their blogs, and just really get to know them. If they're from outside a state, we'll be like, hey, this person's from Seattle, this person's from Columbus. We'll let them know so they can really know the people, and that really makes the influencers feel special. If they've actually taken the time to kind of get to know who these people are, then they really love that. So I think that it's just, being ready for the hard questions. It's being ready to have people on your farm. So if media was coming, same thing, making sure everything's looking nice. Knowing we'll always give them kind of where we'd like them to go. So on the smaller dairy farm, the bloggers helped with the morning milking. So they knew that they were going to go in the milking parlor, and they were actually going to show the bloggers how to milk a cow. Yeah. And then at the larger farm, they knew they were going to touch on environmental responsibility. So just so that everybody's on the same page and just knows what's going to happen.
Adriane, I want to dovetail onto that to ask, has having influencers on the farm changed, or how has it changed the way you guys operate, the way your systems and facilities are run? Are there things that have come out of those tours that you've said, we maybe need to change this or paint this or redo that? Or
It hasn't for the most part. I think my husband and our family does a pretty good job of being ready for anybody to stop by at any point in time. It's kind of like keeping your house clean at home, If you're always ready for somebody to come over, you always got cookies in the freezer, you're ready at any point in time, because anybody you meet, whether they're on the farm or they're in the grocery store or they're on the street and they learn you're a dairy farmer, you have to be ready at any point in time to be able to answer those hard-hitting questions. So for us, it's kind of a treat to be able to welcome them into our home, per se, because those are conversations we're having all day, every day anyway. For us, the ones that are really fun are when, and they're influencers in their own right, but when we get the school buses full of grade school kids that come out and they're like, oh my gosh, it smells and that cow is going potty and whatever else. But then you meet their mom on the street 2 weeks later and she's raving about how her child has been talking about this is the first time he's ever gotten up close and personal with the cow. So I think that can kind of range with regard to influencers, but for us, I think it's just kind of business as usual, and you see what you get when you get there. It's one day is just like the next, so it hasn't changed things for us.
I think it's amazing that you have cookies that make it to the freezer. I don't know. I kind of got hung up on that, I guess. Another question. That's apparently my wife's problems. I eat the cookies, I guess. So another question.
I have a question for Hana. Occasionally I will get messages from bloggers, local bloggers, saying, I would like to work with you. I'd like to collaborate with you. I make a lot of egg recipes. However, they're most likely fashion bloggers that have contacted me. And then they will say, if you look at all my followers, I have a lot of followers, and people, whenever I post a recipe, people love it. Well, how do you know that their followers are real followers and not robots? Because then I'll look at how many likes they may have on certain posts, and they may have only 217 likes, but yet they have 32,000 followers. So how do you figure that out?
Wait, you're telling me that there are accounts on the internet that aren't real?
Yes.
I am shocked and scandalized. Hana?
I always look, I actually just go on there and I look, and I see if these people look like real people and not bots. I will say that both Twitter and Instagram in the past about 6 months have really cracked down on that and getting rid of those accounts. So in several client accounts, we saw their followers drop dramatically. And they wondered why that was, and it was because it is bots. There are some websites that you can use. I can send some to you that, you can like plug the accounts in and it'll tell you. But for the most part, I just look at the quality of the followers. Like, what are the comments that are being posted on Facebook and Instagram? And, are these bot comments? Because you can tell. They'll just be like, I love this, and just sort of, like a bunch of emojis, and you're like, Yeah. So you can tell, definitely. But I think that when people are doing that, it's just like we were talking about the pitching. Then email them back and say, hey, maybe we could work together in the future. Could you send me a media kit or some ideas of what you would do? And then if they do send you some good ideas, then, you could think about how you might integrate into your strategy, but they might just be more kind of fishing for business. And I think you just always want to make sure they fit with your organization.
And that one thing about the media kit, they should have on there their engagement rate. Mm-hmm. And you may think, people may not know what the engagement rate should be, but you can kind of tell there's definitely standards. You should have like a 2.5% engagement rate if you have 20,000 followers or something like that. So you can kind of tell that. It may seem low, but you can also then ask them how many views they get on each post, and they can screen cap that, and you can get that real life information.
I'm really happy to say that my followers are at least 99 and 44/100% pure, real, not bot followers, which I think is pretty good standard.
Really
yeah,
good.
That's
because even
good,
if you have, you can never have all follow. People will always follow you that are bots. You can't get away from that, but you can have a high percentage.
Yeah. We've come to the end of our time together. I hope you'll agree with me. This was a really fantastic panel full of a lot of insight from people at some really different perspectives and stages of the game, so to speak. Whether we like it or not as an industry, social media and influencer engagement and all these kind of things, it's a part of our business. If you're not at the table, so to speak, right, you're on the plate. So I think it really behooves us to do this and do this well. So I want to thank our panelists. I hope you'll join me in giving them a round of applause.